Well, here I am. I have for a long time really disliked Tesla for reasons that go back beyond more current reasons and sort of generate from the idea that at a certain point everybody was getting a Tesla, and I just, never being a joiner, didn't really want to have a Tesla for that reason. So I bought other EVs and drove those. I've driven I originally had a Chevy Volt, one of the original Volts, and then I had a Prius, which isn't really an EV, but I had an ID.4, I had a Nissan Ariya, and I still currently own an Equinox EV. So it's been interesting to be able to compare the 2, the Equinox EV, which I've had for about 6, 8 months, and I've been able to really get to know that, get to know what I don't like about it, get to know what still needs to be improved, get to know what's kind of frustrating about it and frustrating about GM's, idea of what to do with an EV. Uh, but I'd never actually driven a Tesla. So a couple of weeks ago, I saw that there was one available at a dealership near me. Um, Good dealership, good reputation. It was a Volvo slash Mazda dealership. And I'd bought something from one of their other dealerships before. They also have a Ford dealership. I bought a Bronco Sport from them a while back. So I went over and decided I was going to take a test drive. And immediately there was a difference in driving the Tesla that I didn't expect. I knew about the torque. I knew about the different aspects of driving an EV that aren't the same as driving I don't like to use the word ICE anymore, a gas powered car. Um, but the Tesla had a vibe. And I know that from reading and hearing from other people that the layout and the sort of starkness and the very minimal design of a Tesla is frustrating to some people. They like to have buttons and all those kinds of things. But one thing that I found in driving EVs that were made by legacy car manufacturers like GM is that, and this has been the case for many, many years, as technology advances, as we move from radio to 8-track tape to cassette tape to CD player to Bluetooth, et cetera, um, and all of the other, electronic windows, there's something about the way that legacy car manufacturers think about adding things to their cars that feels like it's very much as a thing, and the idea of a car goes all the way back to, the car exists as the 50s, let's say, and then they're just adding these things, but they don't think them through. They don't totally tear the whole thing down and then build from the ground up. GM tried to do that to a certain extent with the Equinox EV and their more recent EVs with the screens and all that kind of thing. But what I found in practice was the user experience with those EVs, even though it was based in with Google and all that, is that instead of, like, say you use Android or Android Auto or CarPlay, instead of getting a full featured, really good looking UI, the app, so say you get the Spotify app, but then beyond the beyond the icon is the same kind of like rudimentary, terrible looking menu system that all cars have had ever since they put touch screens in cars. So the experience is not always all that great with traditional cars that have then been made to do this thing. As soon as I sat in the Tesla and started to drive, I recognized that the idea behind the Tesla was to think about a car from a modern perspective, without the baggage of having made cars for the past 100 years. And therefore, the experience of the thing for me became the experience of, okay, we're now used to interfacing with smartphones, and we're now used to interfacing with tablets, and we're now used to all these sorts of things that work in a certain way that we expect them to work. And using the scroll wheels uh, on the Tesla wheel, as well as using the user interface on the screen, all of it performed as I would have expected it to if I had picked up a smartphone. One of the things that I really liked about the Tesla interface was it didn't force me to hook up Bluetooth in order to use the apps that I wanted to use. Uh, it came with Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Audible, YouTube Music, um, Spotify, all those kinds of things. They're here in on the vehicle. So when I first hit Apple Music, I was prompted, instead of hooking up my phone to have Apple Music tethered, I was prompted to scan a QR code and say, and then hook up my Apple Music account to the car, so that when I get in the car, it doesn't go looking for my phone. My phone connects automatically for phone calls and for texts, but I don't need to use my phone in order to get to my Apple Music. And the same goes for, podcasts and Audible and Apple Music. Those are the three things that I want or need in a car. And they were right there. I put them on my little screen down here as shortcuts, and I can go right away and just start playing. And in fact, when I get in the car, it just starts playing. When you open the door, it lowers the volume. And then when you shut the whole thing off and leave, it turns off. So that's just one example of the Tesla working in a way that seems so much more logical than trying to get your phone to tether to your car, and Bluetooth sometimes doesn't hook up, et cetera, et cetera. I'm only 2 weeks into driving this car, so maybe there are things that will happen that will feel different after a while. However, I can say that I'm using the user interface that I'm used to in the app, and that makes a big deal when that's what I expect to see whenever I'm using that app. Now, that goes all the way across the board. All of the different settings are easily accessible by touching the car icon, and then you just have a left-hand side list, and then you have all of the features on the right-hand side. So it works exactly like you would expect a menu system to work in a car. You're not punching through menu hierarchies until you get down to the place that you want it to be. It's all right there, as it would be in a smartphone. Think about how your Android or your iPhone settings work. It starts out with a list, and then you go down the list and you get into the different features, right? So all of that is great. And then they have added things like a theater, and you can watch Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. They've got a whole thing of tutorials. And I know that there's a way that you can also hook up to something that gives you more choices. Uh, they've got a lot more driving. They've got energy data that you can get into here that shows how much you're driving and consuming and all those sorts of things, which is more accurate than the percentage that you see on the machine itself. The heating and cooling is a pictorial representation of the car and the heating system of the car, and everything is laid out so that if you tap the temperature on the bottom row of the screen, which is like a dock on any smartphone, then you get this pictorial representation of where the heat is and what different things you can turn on, etc. All that goes to say, and I'm going to do a video later sort of walking through all of the different features and how they change the way that I use this car as compared to how I would be forced to use a legacy automobile that turned into an electric vehicle. I'm gonna go through. That has been the biggest pleasant surprise of the whole situation. Now, one thing that I don't like is that the UI itself is a little static. They put things in places and they don't give you a whole lot of options to move things around. So when you start out, you kind of have your navigation as the first thing that you see and a representation of the car as it's driving in traffic and all that. And then your media is down in the corner of your screen. And you can access the audio controls and it shows you what to, you can do all kinds of things. And it allows you to pick the different things like radio. I don't need radio. Bluetooth, Live One, don't even know what that is. Karaoke, the Tidal, Apple Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, don't need it. YouTube Music, my wife uses it. TuneIn, Sirius XM, I don't even ever use TuneIn. So they let you toggle those things on and off just right here from the screen. But when my hands are on the wheel, what's playing on the stereo is obscured by my hand or my arm. So I'd have to drive at like 4 and 7 in order to be able to see what's going on the screen. Now you can tap and get into the app itself, and you can go to library and all those different things to get to what you want, the same way that you would be able to in the Apple Music app. But I want to be able to take this media player and move it to like the top right corner or the bottom left, the top right or bottom right corner, or above where I can see, above the car representation where I can see it. But I can't do that. There are many more things that I like about driving this Tesla, which, by the way, it's a 2021 Tesla Model Y dual motor long range. I haven't taken a trip with it. I've supercharged it once just to see what that's all about. I've been charging with the 110 outlet and the cord that comes with the Tesla, and I've been able to keep myself going as much as I need to. I'm not shocked by the cold weather hit that the battery takes. None of those things shock me. I've been driving EVs for long enough to totally expect that and factor it into what I'm doing. It's been a very different kind of experience from what I've done before. And I've watched a lot of Tesla videos over the time that I was thinking about getting the car. And then as I was, after I got the car, that's one of my favorite things to do. After you get something, you watch all the videos to see what people say. And there's some things that surprise me. Some people say that like the plastic that exists in here feels cheap, and the vegan leather feels cheap. I've driven a lot of cars, and a lot of them have been relatively inexpensive cars, and they don't have the plastic trim pieces and everything else that exists on those cars are nowhere near what exists in this car. This car, I would say that you know, you're I would put it up there with the same kind of material qualities, interior qualities as, say, an Audi, a BMW, not high end, but sort of medium or lower end spec, where it's nice, but it's not over the top. And I think it feels really good to sit in, and it's been very nice to drive with. Things like the door handles are stupid. Uh, and it was cold outside, and I had to like pound on the car door to get the door handle to become unfrozen. So there are things, and I'll make a list, and I'll make a more full featured video about those things as time goes on. But I felt like after 2 weeks, I could come on here and I could talk about how different, pleasantly different, the Tesla experience has been for me than to get into another legacy vehicle. Although the Nissan Ariya was probably the nicest interior that I got in, and it wasn't a high trim Ariya. It was just an Evolve, I think. Anyway, I just liked the way that it was designed. It had sort of like a very Japanese feel to the design, and there was more legroom. Um, so I just really appreciate this. And one thing that I appreciate more than anything else, and this is something that I realize is not a thing that matters as much to other people as it does to me, but quality of the stereo or the infotainment system, because it's not a stereo anymore. And there are 14 speakers in this car. And the audio system was designed by people that Tesla hired who had worked at B&O, Bang& Olufsen. So it's a very high quality system. And I appreciate that as much, if not more, than a lot of the other stuff. So Tesla Model Y, 2021 Tesla Model Y, dual motor, long range, 100 and 700 something thousand miles on it. Still looks and feels like a brand new car on the interior, and there's like not a mark on it on the outside. $19,000 and change out the door for this car. And if that doesn't tell you something about A, the US car market, which is totally effed up, and B, uh, the kind of value that you can get by getting into an electric car, be it a Tesla or anything else. Yeah. In fact, I would say most people are saying if you want to get an EV, lease it. I don't believe in leases really because you're just renting a car long term. But buy a used EV before you buy a new one. We bought our Equinox EV before the $7,500 tax credit went away. And so we got a good deal on that, but took a major hit in our depreciation after the fact. So our car is not worth nearly what we actually owe on it. And I know a lot of people who bought Teslas and other EVs have experienced the same thing. From an enjoyment standpoint, this Tesla has been great, and I have really been enjoying it. And I'll be back with more videos on certain features and certain aspects of it and a little bit more of a long-term review once I get that. But for $19,000, yeah, this is a hell of a lot of car for $19,000. And so if you've been thinking about it, think about used and think about getting yourself a Tesla, or think about getting yourself a Tesla. I'm not a fan of Elon. I'm not a fan of some of the cultishness that goes around Teslas or anything like that, but I like the car a lot more than I thought I would. Um, So there you go.